Okay, folks, it looks like we're 9:31 and everybody's here. So with that, we'll call the meeting to order. And first on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the January 29th meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Moving on to unfinished business. We have a review of previously covered sections. Anything there requiring further review?
So I think we're going to change up the order a little bit.
Want to do Peter first?
Yeah, let's do Peter first. And then we're going to take each code in order after that. We'll try and get a final reading, a final motion on each code, and then deal with those remaining issues when those codes come up. Okay. And then we'll add that to the minutes of that final motion, okay, that amendment, if there is one. So let's do Peter first.
And we'll do a review of the International Existing Building Code, all chapters, and Peter, go ahead.
Morning, my name is Peter Velkov. I am with Inspections, and I'll be presenting the Existing Building Code, International Existing Building Code today. So I wanted to do a little introduction to the book and to the review that I have done. So I wanted to explain the book first. We kind of really put some importance into this book along with IBC. So the purpose of the book is to cover specific conditions of reusing existing buildings for repairs, alterations, change of occupancy, additions, or relocations of existing buildings. So the book is organized in chapters, as you know, but the most important part of it, I guess, is explained in chapter 3, which defines those methods that you can look at existing buildings through the code book, and that's the prescriptive compliance method, which is described in chapter 5. And then work area compliance method, which is chapter 6 through 12 for different types of repairs or remodeling of existing buildings. And then performance compliance method, which is described in chapter 13. Again, it's an important book, and the City of Fargo Inspections is trying to promote this book because this is a way to save existing buildings. We see quite a few existing buildings that either are demolished or not properly addressed through the IBC. So we try to point the book at architects and designers alike so we can save existing buildings. Significant changes in this book. I kind of pulled some of those important parts that changed from 2015 to 2018, and I'll kind of listed them down. So sections in the old code 410, accessibility, was relocated to a new section 305. And chapters 4, 5, 6, 13, and 14 have been relocated, resulting in reorganization of the book. It's kind of a little confusing once you open this and start comparing it to the old book because of this chapter shifting. So again, that's a big change in this new edition of code. Big portion of code changes are reflecting structural changes and structural design in existing buildings. So I had a note here, Justin, if you find something in the book and you want to point it at us, it would be a good time now to discuss and maybe amend the code. Requirements for live loads in chapter 4 and 8 are combined and placed in chapter 3 in this book, And that is intended to apply for all compliance methods now. So that is a big change that was done in this edition of the book. Structural components damaged by snow events must be repaired, assuming snow loads for new buildings from the IBC. Again, I've noticed quite a bit of reference from the existing building code regarding structural design going back to the IBC. This is section 405 and subsections in the existing building code. New exception is added for loading of existing structural elements next to an addition in building design using the International Residential Code. That's section 502.4. When a work area includes more than half the building in alteration, wall anchors must be installed at the roof line along reinforced concrete and masonry walls. That is a new change in the book, so it's listed as significant in my list here. Building undergoing a change of occupancy shall have live snow, wind, and seismic loads checked. Again, most of those changes reflect the structural design. Design loads are based on IBC level forces. Again, there almost always references to IBC for structural design in this book. Now, with this addition, when change of occupancy occurs, placing a building in a higher risk category, the seismic loads on the building must be evaluated using, again, IBC level forces. Access to the building must be maintained when passing through or near other buildings and structures. That's also a change in this book. Where storm shelters are required based on the IBC and ICC 500, which is a standard for design and construction of storm shelters for Group E occupancies, schools, and the occupant load is 50 or more, you need to have a storm shelter. So it will trigger construction of storm shelter in schools. So that's a new change in the IEBC for this.
I just want to, you're still summarizing, correct? You're not going through the items,
Nope,
so don't
I
worry
will
about
go
the
section
items.
by section. These are the significant changes, and I summarize them, then I'll go section by section. I thought I pointed out that I will summarize first, then I'll go section by section. And you don't have this, I can give you the list. I can email it to you or print it out, but it's a summary, so I didn't think I should print that out. Again, it's storm shelters, 50 or more students in Group E occupancies, or actually occupant load 50 or more in Group E occupancies needs a storm shelter in this code cycle. Carbon monoxide provisions are added in prescriptive methods, additions, alteration, level 2 additions, and in additions for I1, I2, I4, and R occupancies. So carbon monoxide is something new. Emergency escape and rescue openings provisions related to being operational have been added to prescriptive compliance method and alterations level 1. So it's the point is you need to have operational emergency egress in existing buildings. Single exit buildings and spaces under alterations level 2 and 3 have been modified to be more consistent with IBC. That's another change in this book. Alteration level 2 requirements that require water for automatic fire sprinkler system be available at the floor of alteration without the need for fire pump has been modified to moved to chapter 9 for alteration level 3, and the pump criterion was deleted. So that's pretty much what I have as a summary for significant changes in this book. And now you have the list of all the sections that have been changed. I tried to cover all sections that have any change, And at the beginning of the book, you notice that on page Roman 6, the marginal markings section shows that solid vertical lines would mean change in the code, deletion indicated with an arrow, and a single asterisk placed on the margin indicates the text or the table has been relocated within the code. Double asterisk placed in the margin indicates that the text or table immediately following it has been relocated there from elsewhere in the code. So following those, I did a comparison between the old and the new book, and I'll go over all those sections now. So I have this little paragraph on the top that we allowed in the previous code cycle the use of Chapter 34 from the 2012 IBC for existing buildings. My observations and my colleagues' observations point out that we really don't need to amend the code with that anymore, since pretty much no one really required using Chapter 34 from 2012. So we'll just eliminate that amendment in the code around this cycle. Again, it's all open for discussion. If you like to see Chapter 34 from 2012 still being amended with this cycle, we can discuss, I guess.
Peter, wasn't Chapter 34 basically Chapter 5 out of this book? So it kind of doubled up anyways?
Yep. It is the same as prescriptive method.
So
performance
as long as this entire book is adopted, I don't see any reason why we still need to hold on to 34.
And that's what we've noticed, that architects and designers are using this book and not going back to Chapter 34. It just is pointless at this time to keep the door open for 34 in 2012. It's going too far back now anyway, so we'll just switch just to this book, just to the existing building code. So Chapter 1, we'll start with the scope and administration, and in the title section, which is 101, title, we changed the name of jurisdiction to City of Fargo, as we have done in the past. I will pause after each one of those sections. If you have any comments, you can address those. So the scope, it's very typical as in the past. We have amended the code. 101.2, the scope that clarifies detached and one and two family dwellings, townhomes up to 3 stories to comply with the existing building code and with the residential code. It's just a clarification. I don't see any change in the meaning of the code, so if you don't have any questions or the next change is in section 104, and that deals with flood ordinances. So in 104.2, I have a typo here. 104.2.2.1 is the, no, it's, no. Yeah, it is right. 104.2.1, determination of substantially improved or substantially damaged existing buildings and structures in flood hazard areas. Since City of Fargo has flood ordinances, rules, and guidelines to deal with specific requirements for flood hazard areas, we propose to delete this section entirely. Next section is 104.2.2.1, and that's the building elevation, and that also we have amended in the past. So the code official is authorized to require an existing building to be investigated and evaluated, and we have amended it in the past with the capital letters at owner's expense, and I propose to keep that as amendment in this code by a registered design professional based on the circumstances agreed upon at the preliminary meeting. The design professional shall notify the code official if any potential non-conformance is changed now with non-compliance, which is a minor change, but I listed that as well, with the provisions of this code as identified. So we just proposed an owner expense at this time, and the change also made to this section is that non-conformance would change with non-compliance, which doesn't change the meaning otherwise. (104.8) is liability. And that was amended in the past with the text at the bottom of the section. So we propose to amend as it was amended in the past. And that is a paragraph that's added with this section, and that will read, the code shall not be construed to relieve from or lessen the responsibility of any person owning, operating, or controlling any building or structure for any damages to persons or property caused by defects, nor shall the code enforcement agency or the city be held as assuming any such liability by reason of the inspection authorized by this code or any permits or certificates issued under this code. So that was added in the past, and we should probably keep that as around this code cycle as well. It gives us extra protection, the city of Fargo. Next section that is changed is 104.10.1, flood hazard areas. And again, we propose this section to be deleted entirely because of the flood ordinances, details, rules, and guidelines to deal with flood areas in the city of Fargo. Permits 105 and 105.2 work exempt from permit. We propose in the first portion of work exempt from permit under building to add 7 re-roofing and 8 window replacement. Both of those types of work were amended in the IBC, so we try to kind of have consistency between IBC and existing building code. So we propose to add 0.7 re-roofing and 0.8 window replacement as work exempt from permit. 105.2.2 repairs is the next section. The section is clarified and that in certain cases of repair work will require building permit, while other repair work would not require permit. Again, it has some listed cases where you need to have a permit versus where you don't. It's just a clarification that was added to the code to make it clear when you need or don't need a permit. So we don't propose any amendments to this repairs section. Next section would be 106.2.5, exterior balconies and elevated walking surfaces. So that is completely new section. 2.5. And special attention is placed on protecting the structural portions of building to the moisture penetrating buildings. Again, we have heard from architects and designers that we should be pointing more attention towards moisture protection and flushing, and this addresses quite a bit of those requirements in moisture protection or flashing in balconies or exterior walking surfaces in existing buildings. So again, it needs to add that extra layer of protection against moisture. We don't propose any change. It's a good section to have in the new code. Next section is 109.1, general. And that is in the inspections section under inspections. The word visible was added for clarification in the general section, so remain visible is the only change, so it just clarifies the section. It's nothing really. And again, it's in two instances. It doesn't really change the meaning of the section, so there is nothing to really add or change in this. We accept that as is. Next section would be 109.3.3, lowest floor elevation in additions and substantial improvements to existing buildings. Again, this section deals with flood and flood ordinances. Again, Fargo is prepared to deal with that through other documents, so we propose this section to be deleted entirely. Next section is 109.3.6, and that is a new section. Again, it deals with moisture penetrating in a building. Again, it's more like moisture protection that needs to be added to existing buildings. It's similar to the previous one that dealt with the same problem. So it's about adding extra flashing and extra moisture protection in existing buildings. So we don't have anything to add to that section. Change of occupancy, that would be section 110.1. And that's under the certificate of occupancy, section 110. Change in the name of the section from altered area use and occupancy classification change to change of occupancy. The section was changed just to reflect the change of occupancy, and otherwise the meaning is not changed, so there's no need for any change in our amendments schedule. And that is for Chapter 1, what I've seen as changes based on comparing the two books, the 2015 and the 2018. The next chapter is Chapter 2, and that's the definitions. And we have had amendment in the past in the Section 201.3, terms defined in other codes. We actually don't refer to International Plumbing Code, therefore we need to address the codes that we refer to in the City of Fargo. Therefore, we have had this amendment done in the past, and we have to keep that going as long as we're using other codes than the I-code family. So wherever the term International Plumbing Code and or International Private Sewage Disposal Code is used, it shall mean the North Dakota State Plumbing Code. Wherever the term ICC Electrical Code is used, it shall mean the National Electrical Code together with the North Dakota Wiring Standards. Wherever the term flood hazard area is used, it shall mean the Fargo Floodplain Management Ordinance together with the Flood Proofing Code of the City of Fargo, North Dakota. So that's the section that we need to amend in order to address the City of Fargo requirements for code references. Next section is 202, general definitions. And they're added or changed definitions for alteration, approved, building, change of occupancy, disappropriate earthquake damage, existing structure, registered design professional, repair, and substantial structural alteration. Substantial damage was further clarified and expanded. Removed were load-bearing element, rehabilitations, seismic, and we don't propose any amendments to those. Again, it's changes in the definitions in this code cycle. So those are the changes in Chapter 2 that I've noticed. Chapter 3 would be provisions for all compliance methods, and we have a few changes here that change quite a bit the book as it was before. So there are quite a few points here to cover. Starting with section 301.1, the general section. Section was changed to reflect the change in the order of chapters in the new International Existing Building Code. Section 301.2, repairs, and now that section is relocated. We have new chapter 4, repairs, so the repairs section reflects to the new chapter number. Next section that is changed is 301.3, and that's alteration, addition, or change of occupancy. And this section explains how to achieve compliance for alterations, additions, or change of occupancy. Again, there is change in chapter orders, and the reference sections are changed. So it's just an explanation that we don't have any amendment to propose on this. Next section is 301.3.2, work area compliance method. And the changes reflect again the changes in chapter numbers in the 2018 edition of the International Existing Building Code. Section numbers changed to reflect the new sequence. Next section would be 3.1.4, relocated buildings. Again, needs to point that relocated buildings are now in chapter 14. Next section would be complies with accessibility. And the new section points at the ICC 117.1 2009 edition for reference and accessibility. And existing buildings shall comply with that ICC standard. That book is used currently by the City of Fargo. It is adopted, so there's no change required here. Next section would be 302.2. Dangerous conditions section was relocated. There is no change. It's just that it's relocated from other part of the book. The old section I listed 1206.2, which doesn't really make any difference, but it's just a relocation.
Peter?
Next, yes.
Just looking ahead here, I think this is very thorough and an excellent job. But with 17 pages, I'm just concerned that we won't have enough time for.
Okay, I can do just the important parts.
Yeah, I think I would like to suggest if we just address items that are significant, or
Okay.
you're going to maybe do a change that's different than we've done in the past.
Most of it is no changes required. I was just listing the changes in the books between the two. I can list those that we need to amend, and the rest of it we can discuss if needed.
I don't know, does that make sense with everyone? Bruce, are
Again,
you okay
I
with that
pointed
too?
the structural changes. Structural changes are important, I guess, so if we see something that is needed, again, I think it's very good in structural sense, but if structural engineers need to change something, let us know, again. So most of it would deal with flooding from this point on, I guess. So let's go over and
So Peter, just to keep organized, why don't you just touch it for a second so that anybody has a chance to look at it,
Yeah, I
to
want-
see if they want to address it. So, and you can say, this section is clarified.
Yep.
If
I
it's
can touch
clarified-
on each section a little bit, okay?
And just don't get into the detail. And where you see it's a new section, it's going to give them another second or two to look at it. They might want to see it, read it.
Yep, let's do that. So 301.3, alteration, addition, or change of occupancy, there is nothing to be remarked there. 301.3.2, work area compliance method, nothing to refer to here either. Relocated building, new chapter, and that's what this change is. Compliance with accessibility 301.5, this is new section and it points of the 2009 ICC. 302.2, dangerous conditions, we covered. New and replacement materials 302.5, section is clarified, nothing really changed. 302.5.1, new structural members and connections, new section. Structural members to comply with the IBC. Again, I mentioned that there are quite a bit reference to IBC for structural. One exception is added to clarify the section as well. Nothing really to change in this section. 303, structural design loads, new general section. Structural loads are combined into this code to apply for all compliance methods. That's the meaning of, again, we're in chapter 3, which refers to other compliance methods. So it's, again, just referring to the other compliance methods. 303.1, live loads, new section. Again, this is significant change in this book, is pointing more attention towards structural and loads that act upon existing building. Snow loads, new section. It points and addresses the snow loads requirements for existing buildings. 303.3, seismic evaluation and design procedures. Again, new section. We're not concerned with earthquake activity in the city of Fargo, but we don't see any point of amending the code for earthquake or seismic activity in the area. So we propose to keep the code as is, even though we're not really having any events like that. Next section was revised that also deals with earthquake forces, but it's just saying full seismic forces. Word is added, but the meaning is the same. 303.3.2, compliance with the reduced seismic forces. Again, revised section. Table is revised. Nothing really to be added or changed in this section. 304, in situ load tests. that's a new section. We looked at that, Bruce and I, a little bit just to clarify again what is referred here. Again, it's referring to IBC, and Chapter 17 in IBC is dealing with tests on site and how the things are organized. Again, it's very well spelled out in the IBC, so it just points out when you have those tests. Next section, 305, accessibility for existing buildings. Section does not show changes, what I found. It's relocated from the old book, Chapter 4. 305.1, scope. The section is describing maintenance, change of occupancy, additions, alteration, and it was relocated from Chapter 4 in the old book, Section 410. Again, no changes proposed. 305.4.1, partial change of occupancy, just reference sections are updated. 305.4.2, complete change of occupancy, just words are changed from at least to no, not fewer than at 4 locations. 305.6, alterations. It was changed in the words, but the meaning, again, doesn't change much. Less than level 3 was changed to work area in 50% or less of the aggregate area of the building for alterations. 305.8.1, it was moved again from old code section 705. 301.8.4, stairways and escalators in existing buildings. This new section, apparently there was some misunderstanding in the old code how to deal with stairways and escalators in existing buildings. So new section, new escalators and stairways. An accessible route shall be provided to the levels per IBC. Again, it's referring to IBC for how to deal with escalators and stairways and existing buildings. Next section, 305.8.9.
Peter,
Yes.
I'm going to take back what I said, and let's not touch on everyone, because we will be here all day.
Okay.
Why don't you just read it? If you know that it's just a text change,
Yep.
that it's not going to affect the code, you don't need to say a thing.
Okay.
Just pause, take it. You go down to the next one that the board should look at each one. There is going to be a change there, but we're going to
I will
determine
read just the
not
section.
affecting the code, not affecting the intent of the code. Just like the 50%, it sounds important, but it doesn't really affect the change.
Okay.
So any clarification, any text change, this does not affect the code. You can just skip and not say anything. The board will read it quick. They'll bring it up if they like. Okay?
305.8.10, toilet rooms. 305.8.11, additional toilets and bathing facilities. We discussed this. The point is at additional, so it's above and beyond the required. So again, if you add additional toilets, you need to do additional assisted use and toilet and bathing rooms. So no change required in here. 305.9, historic buildings. 305.9.1, site improvements. 305.9.3, entrances. 305.9.4, toilet and bathing facilities. And that is in Chapter 3. Chapter 4, repairs. Again, this was shifted around the code from the previous edition. 4.1.1 is the scope. 4.1.2 is the compliance for repairs. 4.1.3 is flood hazard areas. This is where we propose to amend the code, again, based on flood hazard areas. .1 glazing. Then there was a section that was removed. 405.2.1 repairs for less than substantial structural damage. 405.2.1.1 snow damage. This is a new section. Again, we discussed that this new code is addressing quite a bit of structural loads again and damage based on snow, wind, and other natural forces. This is a new section, and it again points at IBC. 405.2.2, disproportionate earthquake damage. Again, new section, but again, it's related to damage to the structure from natural forces. Again, we don't really have too much earthquake activity in this area, but we propose to keep the section in. 405.2.3, that's substantial structural damage to vertical elements of the lateral force resisting system. 405.2.3.1 evaluation. 405.2.3.2 extent of repair for compliant buildings. 405.2.3.3 is extent of repair for non-compliant buildings. 405.2.4.1 lateral force resisting elements. Next section is important to address. 405.2.5 flood hazard areas. We again propose that to be deleted. 46.1.4 Group I receptacles, and that is for Chapter 4. Next one needs to read Chapter 5. It's prescriptive compliance method on page 23. 501.1 scope. 501.1.1 is compliance with other methods. 501.2 fire resistance ratings, new section. Actually, this is a typo. Just disregard that. The next section that we need to point our attention at is 502.3 flood hazard areas. And we propose to delete that entirely based on the City of Fargo flood ordinances. 502.4 existing structural elements carrying gravity loads. 502.5 is existing structural elements carrying lateral loads. 502.7, carbon monoxide alarms in existing portions of a building. That's a new section, and that deals with the requirements for addressing the CO alarms in existing portions of the building. 502.8 is additions in Group E facilities, and that deals with the storm shelters will be required in a Group E facilities per referred section, and the other section actually would explain where and when do we need the storm shelters. 503.1, general. 503.2, flood hazard areas. Again, we delete that section. That's the proposal.
Peter,
Yes.
I go back to the storm shelter one.
Yep.
Do you know if Fargo is within the 250 mile per hour zone that this triggers?
I have to double check that.
'Cause the way it reads to me is that basically any addition to a school that adds more than 50 people will automatically require a storm shelter. I'm not opposed to that, I just want to let everyone understand that that's a pretty small addition. And storm shelters are they're a different animal to design.
That is 250 miles an hour wind speed.
Right, and I don't know what this table.
Yeah,
that they're referencing
we
is.
won't hit that number.
We don't hit that in Fargo?
No, we're 115,
Okay.
reducible with design. Correct, Justin?
Well, that is the wind speed for a typical building. Now, depends if is it a FEMA storm shelter are they talking about? Because if it's a FEMA storm shelter, then you do have to design for 250 miles per hour, but depending on how they're wording it there. I'd be shocked if they meant actual FEMA storm shelter in every single school edition. That would be a lot, like Mark is saying. That would get crazy in a hurry.
I don't really have the ICC 500 copy. Maybe Justin, you have it, but it's in there. So if we have to check and see if we fall into that category, and then
I think it'd be worth looking up because
But
that would be
again,
one I could see.
it doesn't really change our situation here, even if we keep the section as is. If we're not in that area, we don't do the shelters. It's just that it doesn't make any difference to us. As long as we feel, if we follow the code and we check the ICC 500, if we're within the 250 miles per hour in Fargo, we will need to provide the shelters. If not, we won't. But it doesn't change our situation. We just need to meet the code.
So this is tornadoes wind speed.
We might be. I just need to check.
I'm not saying we would ignore it. I just think that the community would need to understand that that's a significant
Right.
change.
Yeah, and it will be an expense if you need to add a storm shelter. So we need to double check. But for the purpose of the review and the code, I don't think we need to amend it or take it out. We just need to be aware that there is this change, and that change will require eventually to provide that storm shelter if we meet the requirements in the ICC 500 and the table referred there.
Well, I think we should do some research on it and get back to it, because if it is a true storm shelter, a FEMA storm shelter, that would be a lot. So I think we should do some research on it. It doesn't make any sense. You could build a brand new school and not need a storm shelter, but just because you're adding a classroom, then you need to include one.
And it's literally, I mean, you had 1,000 square foot classroom and you're going to be at 50 occupants, so.
No one's gonna be able to afford to add on to their school because a FEMA storm shelter costs a lot of money, but we'll do some I can look into it.
And it looks like the shelter would have to have occupant load for the entire building that you're adding on to, so.
Ryan's got it up on his screen right now.
Yeah, so
You put it on the screen for us?
Yeah, if I could screen cap this, it'd be perfect. It looks like that it's referring to the map in ICC 500. And, you know, I just quick Googled this, but the wind speed in Fargo looks to be 200. Down around St. Paul, there is an area that runs through Iowa and that's all 250. So most of North Dakota is actually in a 160 mile per hour zone, but Fargo's in a 200.
So then I think
So
The
Peter's point.
250 does not even touch North Dakota.
So because,
So 200 though, 200 is still
200 does.
a lot.
It touches and goes up, maybe Wapit, no, it might hit Fargo.
And so the figure that I'm looking at is 304.2 parentheses 1. So
that's the one cited here.
Okay.
That's the one.
So to Peter's point, if we can leave it unamended, because it won't impact us as we're in a 200 or less zone for the entirety of the state. But if they change that in future years, we might have to pay attention to that, and all of a sudden,
Yeah, because
But if
it
we're in a
also,
200 miles per hour, that means we still need a storm shelter designed for 200 miles per hour? Is that what they're saying?
I'm reading this that you don't have a storm shelter requirement until you're in the map of 250 or greater.
Okay.
That's
If we're
how I
down in
understand
Iowa
it.
or Nebraska, then that would trigger it.
Okay. Okay.
yeah, if it changes, it even puts daycares in there. And
Right.
a lot of daycares, more than 50 people.
Right.
Yeah, when I first read that, I thought it was normal wind speed. But it does say tornado wind speed. So.
I have no issues with leaving it as they've amended.
So we don't amend it at this point. We spoke about 503.1, 503.2 we delete because it's flood hazard areas. 503.3 existing structural elements carrying gravity loads. 503.4
Can I
existing.
talk about that one too?
Yeah,
The existing code would allow a structural engineer to evaluate the existing structure with the new loads imposed to decide if it was safe. My understanding is this no longer allows that exception for evaluation. And maybe it's just the wording of it. It says that it has to be replaced or altered as needed. Justin, does that give you the authority as the engineer to say, we don't need to alter it because it will carry the load and we don't have to worry about it? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, I think if a structural engineer determines that it is sufficient to carry the loads, then it shouldn't be an issue then.
Okay. Just odd that they got rid of that exception, and maybe they thought that the exception was doing the same thing the paragraph already did. That's all.
okay. So amend this section to read as the old one. With
I don't think we need to. I just wanted to discuss it. I think just reading through the original paragraph here, it still leaves the design professional the opportunity to say that the structure can maintain the new load without modification.
And we always side with the design professional. Again, the code allows us to do that. Whether the section reads you need to, if we have a design professional evaluating an existing building and saying and signing on their opinion, we'll accept that.
Okay.
I don't remember any one case that we have said, no, we won't agree with the design professional on a structural evaluation. So
Well, I remember one, but there's always options under alternative design and methods to allow that, and a request can be made by the engineer.
So we won't amend this then? No, okay. 503.4, existing structural elements carrying lateral load. 5035, seismic category F. 5036, bracing for unreinforced masonry parapets on re-roofing. 5037, anchorage for concrete and reinforced masonry wall. New section, it just adds clarification to different types of construction. In this case, it would be reinforced masonry walls. 5038, anchorage for unreinforced masonry walls in major alterations. 5039, bracing for unreinforced masonry parapets in major alterations. 50310, anchorage for unreinforced masonry partitions in major alterations. Again, new section adds clarity to specific condition in seismic zones. 50311, substantial structural alteration. Again, it adds clarity to the code in alterations with over 50% of the area receiving substantial structural alteration. 50313, voluntary lateral force resisting system alterations. 50315, carbon monoxide alarms. Again, new section addressing the carbon monoxide requirements in this code section, in this code cycle. 50316.2, ambulatory care. It's listed as change. I don't see any changes between the old and the new, but it has the solid line on the side. 5045, opening protective. 5052, replacement window opening control devices. 5053, replacement window emergency escape and rescue openings. Again, those sections deal with the fact that the code requires operable egress and emergency escape and rescue openings. 5054, emergency escape and rescue openings, again, addressing the need for operational openings. Next section would be 5061, compliance. 5061, point 1.1, change in the character of use. 5064, structural. 5061, live loads. New section, again, changes in structural requirements. 506.4.2, snow and wind loads, new section. 506.4.3, seismic loads, seismic force resisting system, new section. 506.4.4, access to risk category 4, new section addressing the risk category 4 buildings, and again makes reference to the IBC for structural design. Flood hazard areas 507.3, we delete that section in its entirety. Again, 507.4, structural in the historic buildings. 1206.2, dangerous conditions section was deleted. Chapter 6, classification of work. On page 29. The old section 502 is deleted and created a new chapter for repairs. So repairs was deleted. Chapter 7, alterations level 1. 701.3 is flood hazard areas. We propose to delete that. 701.4, emergency escape and rescue openings. 702.4, window opening control devices on replacement windows. 702.5, replacement window. Now we need to see if we need to amend this section because we propose window replacement to not require permit.
So you'd suggest amending this, basically striking out this section because the previous amendment has re-roofing as a non-permit.
Replacement windows, we propose to not require permit. So if we don't require permit, we cannot really enforce a section of replacement windows. Unless we require those in emergency escape and rescue openings. We need to decide.
Yes, I think we should leave this the way it is. There's many things in the code that don't require a permit, but they're still in the code. There's still requirements for the code. So just like you don't need a permit to build a shed, it still needs to comply with the code. You don't need a permit to re-roof. We do have requirements in the code that dictate some things you need to do, and you still need to comply with the code. So if there is replacement emergency escape, we still can say no permit required, but they know they need to comply with the code for anything that is replaced. We have some standard lines on windows, like if you replace it with the exact same type, openable area, we're okay with that. And so that's a lot of detail to get into when people start asking questions about windows. But we don't ever let it get any worse. So if this says, if you change it out, you must upgrade, I'm sure there's some allowances in there for structural. If you have to change the structure, you don't have to do that, things like that. So I think we should just leave it in.
Okay. Next section is deleted. Old section 605 accessibility was deleted. 705.1 general re-roofing section. I wrote that proposed amendment will remove this section if accepted. Therefore, this section will be deleted in its entirety. Again, what Bruce said, maybe we should just leave the section as is, even though we are not requiring permit for re-roofing. We keep the section, so whoever is doing the work, they need to know that they need to comply.
Yeah, I believe that's the same thing we did with the IBC. We left the requirements in. There's still requirements, no permit required.
.705.3 roof replacement. 705.3.1 roof recover. 705.3.1.1 exceptions. 706.2 addition and replacement of roofing or replacement of equipment. And that's for Chapter 7. Chapter 8 would be alterations level 2. The section 801.1 is scope. 801.3 is compliance. 803 section was deleted from the old book. 802.2 vertical openings. 802.3 8.2.1, condition 3.2.5 is revised. 802.2, supplemental shaft and 4 openings enclosure requirements. 802.5, guards. 803.2, automatic sprinkler system. 803.2.2, groups A, B, E, F, 1, H, I, M, R, R2, R4, S1, and S2. 803.2.2.1, mixed uses. 804.2.4, other required automatic sprinkler systems. 803.3, standpipes. 804.4, fire alarm and detection. 803.4.1, occupancy requirements. 804.4.4.1.7, Group R. The section was deleted. 803.4.2, supplemental fire alarm system requirements. Carbon monoxide is 804, carbon monoxide detection, and 804.1, carbon monoxide alarms. That is a new section. Again, it's addressing the requirements for alarms and detection. 805.2, general. 805.3.1.1, single exit buildings. 805.3.1.2.3 is the dimensions. 805.3.2, mezzanines. 805.3.3, main entrance in Group A building. 805.4.1, occupant load travel distance. 805.4.1.2, Group I, 2. Group 805.5.1, corridor doors. 805.9.1, minimum requirement. Yes.
Chairman, I just wanted to ask, how long do you want to go today? You're correct, it appears we won't get done, and we do have the extra issues to review also. So depending on how long you want to go today, decide to have another meeting or not.
I could interject, I've had enough.
Okay?
Okay. I'm fine with that. Do we want to move on to other parts of the code and then readdress
I
this
think
at another
as
meeting?
long as we're going to have another meeting, we could do that at the same time and do all the motions on the code adoption
Okay.
at that time.
Okay.
And I can give Peter some time to go through this and look through for minor word changes. We don't have to
I've
do
looked
all
ahead,
those
and a
at that
lot of
time.
the remaining ones will fit that category.
So if you think we'll get through, it's up to you.
Okay. Well, I think we could if
I can just go through those few sections that actually have a change. And
If that
it's
would,
like four sections that really have a change, and that's pretty much flawed.
that might
and
wrap up
then-
existing, and then we could save the next meeting for,
If you have any questions or concerns.
And I think with a lot of this, Peter, if it's, even calling them out, basically, unless there's one within section 8 that is a change that we should look at, the rest of the stuff, we can see that it's just a wording change or this or that.
Right.
I think it's really helpful what you did so that we could quickly identify that.
Right,
we don't
and you
need to
have the
worry about
table
it.
in front of you, so I can just point at those few sections that we need to amend and be done with it.
That would work.
That would work.
Okay, so the next section that needs to be looked at, I guess, is 906.4. We don't really amend that, but it's new section. 906.5 is a new section. The 1103.3 is a flood hazard. We need to delete that. .4 is a flood hazard. We need to delete that. .1301.2.5 is a new section, but it's also dealing with escalators. We discussed that. It's not much different. 1301.3.3 is a flood hazard. We need to delete that. And chapter 14, 1401.2. In the past, we have amended that. That's on the last page. With the text that I have on the top of the page, so we amended the actual text in the code with the top text, which reads section to be amended to read as follows. Buildings to be moved within the jurisdiction shall comply with provisions of this chapter. Buildings to be moved into this jurisdiction shall comply with the provisions of the international codes for new buildings and shall be certified as to that compliance by an agency approved by the code official. So we took the actual text from the conformance section 1401.2 and replaced it with the text that I have. So I propose to keep that instead of the code section. Next one is 1402.6 flood hazard areas that we delete. And that is pretty much all we propose for changes.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bruce, are
For
you
all the
wanting to do
patience,
the
too.
review then at meeting a couple of weeks from now? Or what's your thoughts on that?
We have a lot of time, so 2 weeks, 4 weeks, it's up to you.
Okay. Third date, 2 weeks from now.
We usually adopt this, it gets adopted around July or August.
Yeah.
So even if we had a meeting, you can set the next meeting.
So then the next would be the 21st. If we just stay on the every other March 21st.
I would like that, there's one amendment that Dave Obermiller is proposing. It would be nice if he was here to explain his amendment.
And I think there's a few when we do reviews that there'll be some time that we want to have conversation there. But
Yeah.
I think the next date that looks like most of us that are here available is the 21st of March. And kind of check on that date, see if it works. If not, we'll have to look farther down the road. Okay. All right. Any other staff reports?
We'll be ready for the next meeting.
Sounds good. Motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.